A report next from Cyril Shaw, Raymond James, status of our investment account and allocation of assets. Welcome, Mr. Shaw. How are you?
Thank you. Doing well. Chair Carvelli, commissioners, nice to be here today, be with you here today. And there is some information that's included in your staff report. I believe it was, that I'll be referring to. I believe it's black and white. So we have on the screen here a color version, if necessary. But wanted to first begin just by giving a backdrop of the general economic conditions and capital market conditions over about the last 12 plus months, and how that has affected the pension fund, the capital markets, and the pension fund investments specifically. So generally speaking, what we saw in 2018 is that we saw a rising interest rate environment. You may have seen and read the talk about the Federal Open Market Committee, the Fed, as how it's commonly referred, and their interest in increasing interest rates, which they did throughout 2018. And what happens when interest rates go up, particularly if they go up in an aggressive fashion or in a fashion in which it is unexpected or more aggressive than what the market is expecting, is that interest rates go up, bond prices go down. Being that we have, as a pension fund, have a conservative allocation in order to minimize volatility, so if we do have boxers come forward, we can manage distributions and have assets available for them. What that means last year is that as interest rates went up, bond prices went down, our assets went down. In addition to this, we have our equity side. We're on a very high level, we're split about 50%. As you can see in that chart, the pie chart in the upper left of the report, I believe it's page 3. As you can see that we are roughly at a very high level, about 50% fixed income or bonds and cash, about 50% equities, both domestic and international. And what on the equity side, what we saw is in the fourth quarter of last year, a general slowing of growth globally, and some nervousness and fear of a slowing of growth and other challenges domestically, which caused stocks, both U.S. and international, to fall. The reason that we have an allocation like this, and the reason that we have diversification amongst asset classes, period, is that in theory, what should happen is that if stocks are going down, bonds, the safe haven, should go up and help offset, at least partially, if not fully, what happens with stocks, and vice versa. If interest rates are going up, it's probably because the economy is moving, and stock prices would be going up when bond prices might be going down. Instead, what we saw last year is that both were moving in tandem, and unfortunately went down in tandem. And so for the first time in 10 years since the financial crisis, we actually had a negative return for a calendar year in the pension fund. Our investment policy statement does allow for this, does afford that we will at times have a negative returns, but the hope is that they will be few and far between. And I'd say that if we look back the last 10 years, you'll see that our performance, the fund's performance, has been very positive. I want to refer you to the other chart at the top of this page, value over time, and you'll see those two lines. The blue line is funds invested, and then the green line is the value of the fund. And what you can see is with each of those stair steps down on the blue line, that's money being transferred from the Raymond James account to the commission account in order to do distributions to fighters that have come forward, professional boxers that have come forward. So, like you said, it's a good problem to have. Those stair steps down mean that money is being, the fund is serving its purpose, and money is being distributed to professional fighters in California. Until this point, and once again, we'll see this in the numbers later, It was only a brief decline thanks to our conservative allocation. But up to this point, over the last 10 years, the performance or the growth in the investment account has been enough to cover the distributions to professional boxers, which means that the corpus of the account has not just stayed intact, but actually has grown while we've been distributing anywhere from $200,000 or $500,000 out of this fund in order to do distributions each year. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions regarding performance before I get into a little bit more detail.
I have a question. Did you reallocate any of this in 2018?
Yes, we did. Some of the, at the beginning of 2018, we actually reallocated more money to domestic equities in anticipation of growth there, and also since we were facing the challenge of a rising interest rate environment. Another thing that we did is with interest rates rising is that we moved out of just our core holding of the S&P 500 stocks into more dividend-paying stocks. So we have the benefit of higher dividends as well as growth from equities. So those are a couple of the
And then
changes.
that was at the beginning of 2018,
Yes.
right? And then at some point after, let's say, the first quarter, did you take a look at it again to see how that was performing?
Yes, I personally am always looking at the performance on typically a daily basis. One thing that the Raymond James Investment Committee looked at and acted upon later in the year is that they anticipated more volatility. We're seeing and we're anticipating more volatility in the market. And so what they've done is they've made a couple of some small changes, and I know I forwarded a white paper that explains some of those changes. So the office has it, and I think there may have been a commissioner at the last meeting, commissioner or commissioners that requested that information, and it enumerates exactly what changes were made. But it was to insulate this allocation, this fund, from some of that volatility.
So at some point you reallocated again?
Yes. So there was the reallocation at the beginning of the year, and then I would call the second insulation from volatility more fine tuning to insulate from ups and downs in both stocks and bonds. So we can move forward if you don't mind. This is just similar to the graphic that we saw in the upper right on the last page. But you can see here, you can see it graphically in that chart, but you can also see in the second column, going backwards, the withdrawals from the Raymond James account in order to do distributions. And as you can see, we actually just last week received a request for from the office for another $300,000 that will be distributed here shortly. Actually, most likely this week. But 2018, $200,000, 2017, $400,000, $200,000, and so on and so forth. Going back to $500,000 in 2011. So over the last 10 years, we have been able to, as I mentioned, more than maintain the corpus of the investments while still doing these distributions. So I think that is, I think that's something that is important for this fund, in that particularly if more professional boxers are coming forward, we'd like to see the fund stay intact. You don't want to see it depleted. However, that being said, if there was a significantly large increase in distributions that were being made, as was discussed when Ms. Harrington was presenting, there may be a need to find other ways to fund those distributions, whether that's increasing contributions to the fund or whatever it might be. But to date, and as history has shown us, so if history repeated itself, then 10 years from now, we would have the corpus intact and all of our distributions made. And then lastly, on performance, is that even with the calendar year 2018 decline of 4.09%, we're still annualizing above our target 6.35% annually. And that positive performance allows us to be, where we are today.
Cyril,
Yes.
this 12.51% loss, that seems huge to me.
And I'm sorry, where are you?
Page 6,
On the performance analysis, page 6,
Okay.
S&P 500, total return.
last 12 months.
Right. So that 12.51% loss, that is the drop in the MSCI EFA, which is the index that tracks developed international. So that is one of the most volatile allocations in the portfolio. And just to give a little bit of color on that, is that a lot of that is related to what's been happening in Europe, generally slowing growth over there, Brexit, as well as some other issues.
But we knew that was coming. I mean, that wasn't a huge surprise, right? So just saying, that's not, could have seen that coming 3 miles. So,
What percentage of our
Just saying.
funds is that?
yeah.
So
how much does that
total
represent?
non-U.S. equity is 12.77%.
How is our, I know we have a very small pension fund and it's not really comparable to, it's hard to kind of apples and oranges, but is there some way to kind of measure how we're performing compared to some of the other smaller pension funds?
I'm not quite certain that there's an index specifically for pension funds of our size, but what we use are indexes and generally widely used benchmarks that reflect allocations that are similar to ours in order to be sure that we are outperforming those benchmarks. What I've included in this report today are each of the categories, the widely used benchmarks, the 3-month T-bill, the Barclays U.S. Aggregate Bond Index, that's very widely used to track how core fixed income is doing. MSCI EFA, as I mentioned, that is international, developed international, and then the S&P 500, which of course is domestic equities. So yes, we are constantly measuring ourselves against a benchmark, and the goal is to outperform the benchmarks that in the same allocation as ours, because ours is quite conservative. If you go forward, you can see there's one chart about our risk versus return, and as I've mentioned today and many times in the past, is that we do have a conservative allocation, and that's by design. That is so that if we have, because of the number of eligible participants that we have in the pension fund relative to the size of the assets, although we haven't seen it over the last 10 years, if we were to be so fortunate to have a large influx of professional boxers who are eligible come forward and ask for their fair share of the pension fund, what would be tragic would be to have a very volatile fund have a down period in most likely equities where the balance of the fund is down, a number of professional boxers come forward, and you eat away at the principal, and it really never has the opportunity to get back to where it was. And where that's important is that it creates inequity between a boxer that came forward this year or 5 years ago and a boxer that comes forward during that hypothetical. And that's because their payout is based on the value of the fund. That's one of the components of the formula of how they're paid out. So having a consistent balance that ideally keeps up with distributions would be
I don't know, Cyril. I don't know how you got below 5 million. That's what I'm wondering.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
And maybe I misunderstood. You're saying that we might be giving one fighter a certain amount of money and a parallel fighter who came to us during a downturn in the economy, he gets less money.
Right. And that's
Is that what we thought we were doing? I mean, didn't we presume that there would be some commonality to the payment?
Well, I thought this was, you're making a point to not increase our risk position, right?
yes.
Well, it's
No,
not a
not at all.
matter of the risk, it's a matter of some fighters are getting a pension at this level and other fighters are getting a pension at a lower level.
But the difference you're talking about really is the difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution. We have a defined contribution plan, not a defined benefit plan for our boxers. So there's
Right.
more risk in a defined contribution versus a defined benefit plan. Correct?
Is that where we should be?
It's just
I mean,
the way
I
it
don't know.
is.
I'm just sort of struck by that.
So
How
I may
would
be
you
able
need to
to,
find benefit?
Chair Carvelli, if I may, I may be able to speak to that
course.
to some small degree. Is that so? There, I recall, not with tremendous clarity, but I do recall when the pension fund did make the transition from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan. And the impetus for that change is that if we define the benefits and every boxer were to come forward, or if we just accounted for those assets, the pension fund would be unsustainable, assuming that 100% of people came forward. The solution to that was to convert it to a defined contribution plan so that every boxer that comes forward gets his or her fair share of what's in the plan. So it reduces the risk of to the commission and at worst the risk of insolvency, but it does create a situation where the balance of the account, the balance of the pension fund, does weigh into what a professional boxer's payout is. That's one component. There's other components as well.
I don't want to labor the point.
No, go ahead.
The boxers have no idea what kind of a plan we have. Somebody said there's a pile of money there and it goes to people who fought X number of times and so on and so forth. They don't know about fluctuations.
Sure.
And I just feel there's a equity
Absolutely.
deficiency in a guy coming off the street and he made the mistake of coming in 6 months too early or 6 months too late. I mean, you almost say maybe we should tell the people who knock on the door, it's a bad time. Come back in 6 months and you're going to get 20% more. I mean, that's all. I mean, I just find this a bit inequitable.
I recognize the point that you're making, and to a large degree agree that there is inequity if the balance of the fund is one of those components. What I'm here to do, and what Raymond James is hired to do, is to minimize that volatility while at the same time growing the fund. What that means, and I think we've been very successful in doing that, particularly over the last, throughout the last 10 plus years. And that has allowed the value of the fund to stay, for the most part, even. If you look, back at that, those green and blue lines or charts, you'll notice that even though we're giving out distributions, that green line is staying within a fairly narrow range. So that's how we are adding value and helping to minimize the volatility, which therefore minimizes the inequity with that balance having to be part of the formula in a defined contribution plan.
Cyril, can I ask a question? Because in the beginning of this conversation, you had laid out a scenario in which you're in a highly volatile market and more boxers come forward.
Mm-hmm.
So in your professional opinion, as we project towards, I know this is only projection,
Sure.
But as we project towards 2019, 2020 and see the market and how it's playing out, do you see that scenario likely that we should at least be aware of in the next year or two? You thinking about?
No, I don't see it
Okay.
as likely, and specifically, I don't see it likely for this pension fund.
Okay.
Number one, because of the conservative allocation. And if we did see it's difficult to predict,
Sure.
as you pointed out, but if we did see a downturn in stocks, we're not going to be in an aggressive rising interest rate environment. So we're going to see some help from the bonds and vice versa. So no, I don't foresee that happening. It would be interesting though if you all are successful as a commission and we have a number of boxers come forward that is unlike the trends and the data we've seen over the last 10 years, then I think we'd want to revisit that subject.
Thank you.
So let me say something. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. I don't want to leave an impression that this fund is an inequitable fund for fighters that maybe come forward in the wrong time. I don't think that's the case at all. I think you were talking about risk allocation. I think our fund balance has been pretty stable over the years, including ups and downs in the economy, which is we have to take into consideration predicting the economy as they're predicting the weather. But other than that, there's a stable fund balance. It continues to increase because a number of events continue to increase. And we're going to continue to take money out because that's the purpose of this fund, to give money to fighters. Agree?
Well said,
Okay.
and yes, agreed.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Cyril? Sir, thank you.
Okay,
That
thank you
was
very much.
enlightening, and get us back over 5 million, please, because
Working on it.
I'll
as
buy
we
you
speak.
lunch.
there's one thing that I'm not thrilled about right now. Okay. Okay. We have item number 3 under these updates, reassessment of criteria for eligibility. I don't know, based on the fact that we've reestablished our pension fund subcommittee, and they're going to be making data requests, that perhaps this is appropriate until they have had a chance to do some work, and then perhaps we can talk to them about, the subcommittee can look into eligibility if at all appropriate. Does anyone disagree with that?
Nope.
Okay.
Is this an issue that's come up?
I brought it up, remember, in our agenda meeting? I think if we were thinking of ways to find more and make more contributions.
Okay, but
okay.
we already have discretion to,
We do, but I don't know if we have enough,
Enough.
we're comfortable where we are right now to start
Okay,
thinking
okay.
about eligibility changes.
Got
I
it.
think our next step is to do what you're gonna do. Just get some more data.
If you see an issue, just bring it
got it, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for clarifying.
Okay, let's finish item number 9, then we can take our break. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action, creation of pension benefits for mixed martial arts athletes. I am guilty of asking that be added to our agenda. Wanted to get a sense from the commission, is this something that we should start having continued discussions on? We would like to get some more information. I mean, we are, it's, every now and again, we hear comments about it, we get questions about it. So I don't know if the commission has a sense of a way to move forward with this issue. Anybody? Commissioner Martha? Come on, help me out here.
Oh, Andy and I've talked about this over the years. It's a very complicated issue, and it would take a very long time. It's not impossible. I almost think we need to bring in maybe, a nonprofit, or maybe go to the ABC level, or, but it's not impossible. I mean, we could do it. I think we probably need a subcommittee or something like that to have a very detailed look at it, probably. Don't you think, Andy?
I think it needs to have more,
Investigation.
and it would be then, taking the chair will submit it to the legislative committees just for their review, because this would take a legislative meeting.
So, since I'm the one who kind of asked we put it on the agenda, I'm comfortable that the actions we've taken here today with regard to the next step for the pension fund subcommittee, so I'd like to let them do their work and go step by step. Think about eligibility, changes if necessary or appropriate. Think about starting a process for MMA athletes that would obviously be a big effort.
Can
Yes.
we make another subcommittee to address making the pension fund for the MMA? Because that's a huge thing. And since Martha's done work on it, I nominate her. Is this there's a lot here on the plate, and it is really kind of a, yeah. That's mine.
Are you okay with, now she's picking on you. Everyone's gonna get their turn today.
Boy, she's
Are
really.
you okay with that?
Will you work with me, Andy?
Sure.
He doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because Bob Thelmas from USD did the boxing one, and he has his
Yeah.
organization that,
Yes.
a lot of the
The
legwork they could
chairman
do.
and I have spoken to
Okay.
them
Yeah,
length.
they're active again. I know, did you see their letter that they, yeah.
Well-
Commissioner Ayala,
I think
can we reassign you to that committee since you know a little bit about MMA, sir? Just to
I
be
don't know
there
if
for
this
Martha?
Commissioner Cherokee just wants me to.
not written. No.
No.
Of course.
It's a two-member committee, is that okay with you?
That works.
Fine.
Okay, Vice Chair, is that good? So we shall establish a pension fund subcommittee to look into the process of adding MMA fighters to a pension fund.
I want to see Mary pick on Van today.
I already did. I got mad at her for saying we're going to jail.
Sir, if
If
I can just bring your attention to this, and this has happened very recently. In fact, I don't think I've even sent out the article to all of the commissioners just yet. But I would encourage this commission, and I will keep you informed, as to keep an eye on this pension distributions. Because Mr. Walker, to my left, has just opened up a tool for this commission since the last meeting and allowed us to place these names on the website. Okay, they're now public. That's not happened before. And since he's allowed me to do that, I've now using my media contacts to get this word out. Before I was kind of
Hamstrung.
I could not use the tools that I knew how to use to help. Let's see what happens by next meeting. Because I have a real feeling that I have enough contacts to get this word out. And in fact, as I'm sitting here in this chair telling you, we've already got about 4 people that we've already ran down since that article ran. That article's been out like 3 days. So, maybe 4 days. You saw the art. You read it? I'll send it to all the commissioners. But if Mauricio from the WBC tweets it out, all these different people tweets it out with the list, I think we'll have some positive feedback.
No, it's up to the pension, it's up to you guys. We've authorized the pension fund subcommittee to work with and decide what's an appropriate change.
So
We've already given you that authority.
we have authority.
You also,
Okay, we're just
And I-
clarifying.
and I think this subcommittee has the
Okay.
authority to keep an eye on the distributions. It's obviously what we want. And if you feel like we need to change the contribution requirements, then you need to come back and you would come back to us.
But we need to come back. So that's what my concern is,
Not
that
on the change for the reserve withhold, not on the withhold. That you have
Okay, so,
authority to do that.
right, so we, the pension subcommittee, have authority to direct Beth Harrington as manager of bookkeeper
Whether
of
it
the
be
funds,
10 to 50 or
to
60%.
change the suspense amount to 50% like tomorrow. We can
And-
do that without commission approval because we've been delegated that. Okay.
That's correct. And just for further clarification, because this happened between the time that you received those packets and as I'm sitting here today, just to give you an updated report, we have approximately $110,000, $120,000 of pension payouts that came in very, very recently since your meeting materials have came out. And we've also got another group that's coming, and we've just requested another, I believe it was $300,000 from Cyril. He's probably got that letter last week that we've transferred over. That's not reflected. The bottom line is that with this new tool that we have, let's see what happens next time, because I think that this allocation question, and I think this is a very important thing that this commission discussed at this time, just because there's some changes. I believe we're going to start getting some movement,
Start getting some.
some movement, some payouts.
More boxers becoming aware that they have benefits. Good. All right, you guys have a lot of good questions to ask for, a lot of good reports to.
And do you want to follow up on the contract to find the people?
Yes, ma'am. If you saw Beth, if you caught on, she transferred over this company that gave us the information of this company that can locate these people. We're in the process of getting that contract together. Contracts within the state government take a bit of time, but we're working on doing that as well.
What kind of performance do they have a record of?
I don't know, sir. I haven't looked into exactly what their performance benchmarks
Well,
are.
you know, if they're very successful, they could create a little minor tidal wave of people coming forward
Yes, sir.
into a sort of a vague area we have here of how much money there is and what all that might be. I just wonder, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
you know, should we be thinking about getting some sort of a internal resource on all these financial matters as a commission unto itself, a person or somebody who would work for us, maybe it's somebody out of that vast morass of people in Sacramento who could help us understand what's going on and tell us where we have areas of concern.
It occurs to me as you're saying that, as opposed to trying to hire somebody or go through that whole mess, that perhaps, Andy, you could, I mean, Director Graffilo was here offering assistance. You could think about who at the department could be a help to us.
Yes, sir. I will.
Like an audit kind of thing.
And let us know.
They have a great, the budget office.
Yeah.
They have a budget office, they have financial people, there is a morass.
Yes, there is.
Okay, let's do that and report back to us on that.
Yes.
All right,
Yes, sir.
we're gonna break for lunch. Let's be back at 12:45. Thank you. We are back in session, and we are on agenda item number 10, I believe. Our executive officer's report. Mr. Foster, if you will.
Thank you, sir. As of when I wrote this document, the commission had deposited $1,645,000 to the support fund, $8,898 to the Nero, and $261,663 to the Boxers Pension Fund. Obviously, from the weekly updates that I provide you, the commission's well above $1.9 million now in deposits. To give you a little bit of perspective, certainly for our new commissioners, so you have some idea, the commission's budgeted this year for approximately $1.7 million. Okay, I have budget bill language. The commission has budget bill language. I can request another $250,000. As you all know, I've made that request for additional appropriation for two reasons. This commission right now is close to $2 million from this past weekend in deposits, with a budget of $1.7 million. Okay. We have 4 or 5 months to go. We have until June 30th. Okay, and if you saw the schedule's got a lot of big events. Okay, I've got to have money to run the shows with. We're a specially funded operation. That's number one. Number two is I'm really not certain, as you see in your reports, I'm not certain where we're spending that. I've got kind of an idea. But I'm telling this commission in a public meeting, I'm going to run the shows. We're revenue positive. There's no question about that. And we'll have to let the budget work itself. I mean, I don't know exactly where we're spending that because the fiscal system doesn't work yet. Or
How long has the fiscal system been not working?
14 years.
yeah,
No, I'm serious.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it's like 14 years.
it's been over. It seems like it's been over a year. It's ever since they switched from CalSTARS. Remember the old CalSTARS reports that I used to? They weren't the most beautifulest reports, but they provided information. Ever since that transition, and I want to be very clear to this commission right now, this is not the DCA Budget's Office fault. They're trying very diligently. I meet with them often. They're trying to provide me projections and these type of things. But this commission needs to be known in a public meeting, and I'm letting everybody know. I'm not certain exactly what we're spending. I know we're revenue positive. I can assure you of that. But I'm not certain where we're at on the appropriation expenses side.
Can we do this? Because, so fiscal really, I mean, for us, it was supposed to go online about a year ago, and it didn't. But really, it's been a problem long before this DCA administration, long before this budget office administration. It really has been going on for like 14 years. Like, honestly. And so can we do this starting maybe the beginning of next fiscal year? Can we keep an Excel spreadsheet of how much money we spend?
We
can't afford that.
Well, to your point, doing what you just said is kind of where I have a pretty good, I mean, because look, there's some things I can tell you exactly where we're spending that. Civil service line items, per rata, all these fixed costs, rent, these things I can tell you. Where it gets tricky is because of the way that we operate, throwing inspectors out there and having them go do travel and sending drug tests to UCLA and various kinds. There's lots of variables. Our revenue and our expenditures are directly tied to these events, as you all know, and you'll be reading the Sunset Report soon. 86% of this commission's revenues comes from the events. Okay, 14%, a little bit less than that, but 14%, call it 14%, comes from license fees. Okay, so we're not like other programs where it doesn't really matter a whole lot because you've got a pretty good idea of your costs and your expenses, like your revenue and your expenses. But to your point, we're doing that when we can. Where it gets interesting is, and we've worked on it, but let's say you have 4 or 5 inspectors out of the group that just send in their stuff. I'm just being practical. They just send it in late, like months late, which happens. And then there's, so what we try to do and what we do on a lot of these events, and when I'm looking at them, in fact, Tricia and I worked on one yesterday, was one we got coming up for this coming weekend. Okay, we're looking at this one. This one's going to bring in this much revenue, and we're going to spend X amount to regulate it. That's what we're doing. And to keep your expenses, you're exactly right.
Is there no cutoff for the inspectors? They can just turn it in whenever?
Oh, I mean, I've sent out memo after, and
That's the state's policy.
that's right. I mean, they're going to get their, I mean, and we want to pay them, but like, I'll be like harsh. Oh, I'm not going to use you, or there's going to be repercussions, but then I run and I need them. So it's like, I need to use them. So I don't really have any, they've been getting better. They're much better than they were.
Could, on the budget side, in terms of more money that the commission would need for, so just I think I get the sense of what you're asking for, Andy. But my question is more you need more front, essentially the revenue coming in both between the commission gets revenue by putting on events, and then those events then help fund essentially the regulation of the of the system. Is that correct? Is that how you
Correct.
describe it? So essentially, what you need though, in order, since we're doing so many events, it's sort of like a sort of upfront to help fund as before the revenue comes in from the events. Is that what you're talking about, or
No, we have
For
money
more
in the
inspectors,
bank.
yeah.
We just need additional appropriation, authorization to spend it.
got
And
it?
that's what I've asked for, through the $250,000.
Yeah, we are a spending authority. It's not a general
Got it.
fund.
Okay. It's just more just getting authorization.
And what I'm telling the body is we're revenue positive. We're going to have a surplus this year. But I'm not exactly sure how much we've spent at this point, which is not a great place for me as your executive officer to be telling you in the month of February. I'm not sure exactly what we've spent. I can get you a pretty good ballpark estimate after I talk with the budget office for a while. We're going to need to know next Tuesday, probably. But, you know, it's just the purpose of me bringing this up to you is to express some degree of my frustration in the fiscal system. And they're working on it. And I can't really, I've not got any other reason than just try to inform you that I'm doing the best I can with this situation. But I assure you we're revenue positive. I know that much.
Do we have an ETA on the fiscal system?
Chris?
Chris?
Any idea?
Don't mean to put you on the spot or
No, no worries. Chris Castrillo, Deputy Director of Board Bureau Services for the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you all. So, yeah, a couple things just about Fiscal. DCA itself, don't want to dispute the overall history of Fiscal, but we were integrated in Fiscal in July of 2017. Look, as everyone knows, it's definitely been a challenge, has not been a challenge just for our department. Andy alluded to the work that our budget office has been doing, whether that's workarounds, trying to get caught up on the fiscal system, doing face-to-face meetings with either commissioners or the executive officers themselves to make sure to their, to the highest degree of accuracy we know where we're at, absent of having those year-end reports from Fiscal. What we do know up to this point is we expect it at the end of March, we will have the previous fiscal year closed out. Now, I know that sounds, quite late for it to be something excited about, but that is, that is an improvement. We haven't been able to see the year-end reports from the fiscal system. We expect to have those March 2019, and then, knock on wood, continue to keep our fingers crossed. Our BSO team's had a lot of communication with the fiscal department, trying to, again, bring this up to speed as quickly as possible. And as Andy alluded to, unfortunately, this isn't just a DCA issue. It's other departments. We're trying to be patient, at the same time also trying to make sure we're moving the ball forward. So that's what I would say to that on the department side.
Chris.
You're welcome.
We've had conversations about this, Chris and others from DCA and Andy and me and others, with regard to Sunset next week, and we're not going to go in and tell them that we don't know where our costs are, and we're not going to talk about that.
No,
To answer Martha's question, Andy, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think you have a pretty good sense of what our expenses are. You like things to be factual and based on real numbers.
Correct.
But, there's a variance. You can budget this stuff, and then there'll be actuals when you get them.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. And that's what we're going to tell them. We know what our costs are. This isn't rocket science. The good news is, as far as anyone's concerned, is we have $1 million reserve. We're gaining in
Yep.
events and revenues. We're making all our contributions. Things are working well. The fiscal state of this commission is a good one. It's good. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah,
That's-
we actually have $1 million in reserve. That's not really the issue. The issue is, we'd like to know to the dollar how much we have and what we're spending. And, it would be nice to be able to balance the,
But I just wanted to cover it in just because you don't see any of the stuff in here. That's the reason. But as soon as I get it, I'll get it to you. And if I get a projection, I'll get that to you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it strikes me that there's a certain parallel between what Andy is grieving about and what we were discussing with two individuals who appeared here earlier today. And that is there's a lack of fiscal, we may be in good shape, and I think we are, but there's a lack of clarity as to precisely where we are. And I suspect also a lack of clarity in terms of budgeting into the future. And again, I think, and I tend to think you agree, we need to have some real financial assistance for this commission, for Andy's operation, to put ourselves in a more knowledgeable position about money.
Got it?
Okay. Just following up on the budget, this is one thing that I would tell the commission, and this is a good thing, and this is what the chairman alluded to. Like I've pointed out, 1.7 plus 250,000. So call that $1.95 million appropriation. As we're sitting here today, this commission's already scheduled to deposit more money than that. Okay? So what happens with the excess is it goes into the support fund, and as you can see on the chart right there, and again, we'll move the screen another time, but for your benefit, the green is the fund condition, the fund balance. And as this chart was being put together, those were the last true numbers that I had, projections from the budget office. So obviously the blue and the red bar are going to be much higher. The moral of this story, the point of this story is this commission is going to have a record year this year. 3 of the last 4 years will be record years as far as the DCA numbers go back. So the green bar continues to go up. The commission's in good fiscal health, and that's my budget update, sir.
Also, I think you get credit for good budget management. I think you work hard at that. And
Thank you, sir.
I think certainly we appreciate that.
Try.
It's part of the program. Okay.
Part B in my report, sir, is you've already addressed it. It was just the update on the regulations. Those shows the timelines of what happened in various pieces. Now, if you're interested as to why this wasn't on the December agenda as opposed to this agenda, if you look at that timeline, there wasn't sufficient time to make the posting and to add it to the agenda. So that's why we're here now.
So this is after the account summary. We didn't get to there yet. This one. So yeah, this is an opportunity for the commissioners to stomp their feet and pound the table on this process. I mean, we saw the letter from CPIL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back to Director Graffiello. I don't know if there's anything for us to do other than be informed and pound our table and stomp our feet. But if you had, Martha, I think you had some comments you wanted to make about all this stuff.
I don't even know what I mean, we have a new process, which is supposed to be more streamlined, right? But I don't know that it is more streamlined because I don't really even know what that means. And we still don't really know what the timeline is, and we don't even know how long this is gonna take. And I don't know that I don't have any predictability as to when this has been going on forever.
With this particular package, this has been going on. I mean, we started working on this, an iteration of this particular package back when Tracy Ryan run the Ledge Red shop. So that was 2 directors ago. It's been years. Having said that, this is what I really feel like is the good piece of the I have a lot of confidence in this. There's this director of the legal shop, and he's got this idea to have some people dedicated to regulations and that type of stuff. That should speed this regulation process along, I would hope. I mean, I can't imagine that it wouldn't. I think what happens now is Spencer Walker's is charged with doing this, but he also does other functions. And Spencer can probably tell you, I call him all the time with other things, and he has other clients. So he's dealing with other things, and there's other pieces in the wheel that goes to this place called I don't know exactly what they do, but they have something to do with it.
OAL.
Um,
Is it OA, are you talking about OAL?
Well, this is before it ever gets filed with the Office of Administrative Law, sir. Yes.
That's a good thing. We don't get there.
Yeah, we're trying to get there because I think the idea is to reduce the number of rejections from the Office of Administrative Law. So the idea is to form this reg unit that will actually push DCA's regs
This is the
through.
new
Yeah.
thing. I mean, to me, it sounds, no offense, to me, it sounds like another layer of stuff that we can't get past.
Where does it go currently?
What-
In the current structure, where does it go? Maybe,
Oh, it's a many-step process.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
So where does it go?
yeah, if we're talking about changing regulations, right? We're trying to change yeah, like what's the, I mean, I don't know I don't want to go into a deep, like, regulatory explanation, but.
So if the commission ordered me to change a regulation, I would go and work on it with staff. I'd work on it with Spencer. I'd bring it back to you the next meeting. The commission would vote on it, and then I would take it and submit it back to Spencer, and it would go from there to maybe legislative, regulatory, and policy review at the department. Then it would go back to legal, and then it would go to legal's director, and the director would look at it. They'd get back with staff. If there's changes like there were today, it would come back. It would,
Jim, there's a sheet that you can give him that he should see. You could
Yeah.
resend it to us. I
That'd be
counted the time it goes just to legal. I think it was 4
Yeah.
times
Well,
before it gets to OL. That's how kind of
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
it is. So if you have that, you can send.
I
that
will
to-
send that.
show him
Yeah.
that. It's a good reminder to us, but it goes to legal 4 times.
And then after it goes to legal, it goes to the director, and the director signs it and says it's good. And then it goes to agency, and the agency secretary has to sign it. And then after that, does it come back to the commission and we file it with OAL? Then it comes back to the commission and we're able to file it with the Office of Administrative Law.
But how much of all of that is done away with this new thing?
I think it doesn't go to legislative and regulatory review anymore, does it? Do you know?
Through the new process?
Yeah, through the
The new
reg.
process has not even begun yet. We have to get the positions.
No, yeah, I'm talking about if there was a reg unit, that going to reg would be demolished.
That's correct.
And then it would only go to legal one time. Is that right? Yeah. Tell how it is. I've only been in one meeting about it. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see.
Uh,
Just
thank-
call my name. I can.
Hey, hi, how we doing? Chris Castrillo, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Services, the department. Appreciate the background. I mean, definitely would have Spencer speak to the nuts and bolts of what the process is. Again, kind of as I mentioned with the fiscal issue, I mean, it's pretty clear to all of us in the executive office that our regulations process takes a significant amount of time. Not to ask for a little bit of forgiveness, but we have 37 programs under the department. There's just a nature of the beast with DCA that we are, if not, I think we're the most reg-heavy department. I don't want to get necessarily fact check on that, but I mean, as you can imagine, 37 programs, each have a handful of regulations that go through every year. So just to start, there's a high volume. We talked about the pre-review process, which was recently implemented, somewhat a little bit before my time at the department. But as was mentioned, that was an effort to try to reduce the amount of regulations that were being rejected at the end of the game by OAL. I think that we've seen that has happened. I think at the same time, we have also seen that the regulations process timeline has gone up. So a little bit of good, little bit of bad. What Andy's been speaking to is the BCP proposal, which the director, when he mentioned in his comments, we discussed with board leadership on our director's leadership budget conference call. The reg unit, I wouldn't refer to it as a new process. I would refer to it as more bodies. I've been going around to board meetings for a little over a year and 3 months as I get to know the department, along with Karen Nelson, Patrick Lay, our assistant deputy directors. And I got to tell you, the increasing the timeline for regulations process, probably the number one piece of feedback that we get from all of our boards, bureaus, commissions, programs, et cetera. And that's the purpose of this BCP. We think a dedicated regulations unit who have a little bit less of the pressure of being also the board council and all the work that goes into that, putting on the board meetings, reviewing agendas, et cetera, et cetera. The concept is now we have a place where these folks are going to be waking up in the morning and thinking about what regulations are we going to get through the department. Again, as Spencer alluded to, this is a proposal. Still has to go through the budget process. But assuming things go well, then July 1, we can look at doing a really positive thing and based off of the feedback that we've got from our boards and bureaus.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Please don't take this the wrong way.
Yeah.
But when we were going through, let's say, the therapeutic use exemption process, it was really cumbersome and difficult, not just because of the number of people looking at it. In fact, that really wasn't so much the issue. The issue was who was looking at it. Because when it got to DCA and even people at agency, there were people who didn't know what we were doing. That isn't going to be so much, that isn't so much the issue with you and with Director Garfield, because you guys know what we do. But adding more bodies of people who have no idea what we do, to me, that just sounds like, we can't do outreach all the time and say, come to a fight, come to and see what we do and see what we do, because they had no idea what we do for a living. So what ended up happening was nobody wanted a TUE, and finally, seriously, I couldn't explain it well enough to anybody. A year and a half later, somebody at DC or an agency went, oh wait, you mean somebody with asthma can't fight without a TUE? Oh, hello? And then all of a sudden, it happened. Do you understand what I'm saying? So my concern is that you do have a lot of boards and commissions, and I don't know how we can, with some of the things that we do, get the detail of it. Like, does there have to be that many people reviewing stuff they don't know anything about?
And if I could just comment just really quick, I hear your concern and I understand the kind of conceptual nature of where that's coming from, but by no means, and I don't want to speak completely for Mr. Markroff, but this is not intended to be a siloed regulations unit that's not going to have any kind of contact with our board councils and all the institutional knowledge that is already there in the department. And obviously each regulation and the subject matter that goes into that regulation is different. As I understand too, there's a lot of kind of nuts and bolts pieces of regulation that are very, very similar from reg to reg. So getting some of those pieces able to just have folks that are focused on that, get the subject matter expertise kind of boiled in. We do think this is going to improve timelines. We're not just working on the reg unit. We've had regulations training for staff. We're trying to get folks that are at the programs being able to develop regs better. So, there's a number of different approaches that we're trying to.
A lot of time on this, but the business of this commission is health and safety, and we have we can stay in our lane. And I think if commissioners want to further inform themselves, we have advocates in Chris and Director Garfield, obviously, and Andy. We can comment as individuals into the budget change process, but I don't think there's anything as a commission that we can do here today other than stomp our feet and bang on the table. So unless we have something else that we're not aware of right now, that this is a convoluted process, perhaps we can move on.
Nope, stomped.
Feedback
Bang.
received. Thank you all very much. Yeah.
All right. Okay, everyone feel a little better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's go to our Andy, our delegated entities, please.
Mr. Chairman, JT Steele with CAMO. That's our amateur mixed martial arts program.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Chairman Carvelli,
JT.
Commissioners. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to my Commissioner Araby. Hope that you find your time here very rewarding. Happy to have you. JT Steele for the record with Camo, President of Camo. I submitted to you my report on behalf of Camo. We are off to a busy start already this year. We've got 4 events planned for this weekend, so we are off to the races.
Any down here, JT?
That better? Great. Yes, we actually have a combined show with IFS here in Anaheim, just actually down the road. We have that on Saturday. We're also in San Diego and Los Angeles on Friday. Up north on Saturday at Napa Valley, which has turned out to be an interesting and great fight town, Napa Valley for amateur MMA. So there's surprises even this late in the game. In the report, there were some developments that I haven't mentioned. We've talked a lot about our drug testing program, and just today I received a letter from Dr. Eichner from the Smyrtle Lab, and many thanks to Commissioner Martha Shenarquitas and Executive Officer Andy Foster that helped facilitate this. But it looks like Camo is going to have their athletic drug testing at the Smyrtle Lab, which is obviously it's a world-class laboratory. There's nobody that's doing anything like this with their amateur program. So thank you so much for supporting that. Dr. Eichner was very open and willing to work with amateur athletes and get them in a testing pool early and often. Something that I really didn't see happening in amateur MMA for many years, and here we are. So we're going to be planning a training because this will be a different level of testing, and it's going to require some more knowledge for our inspectors to be able to accommodate these type of advanced drug tests. And we're going to start doing those in April. Some testing, some training for testing at a large level across the state. So we're very excited about that. I did put a note in there as well. There's been some discussions about the involvement of amateur officials moving on to become pros, and we've seen a lot of the new Camo officials. And I just wanted to publicly thank our officials, because even as our officials graduate and they become professional officials, they continue to work and to hone their skills and to stay sharp by working amateur events consistently. And when they do that, they do it at a highly discounted rate. And they also offer a tremendous amount of volunteerism to Camo in pro-am events. And I just wanted to thank our officials. We really do have the best officials in the world. And a lot of times we don't realize how often our top officials are even giving back to the Camo program and the grassroots of the program. And you also see this new up-and-coming group of officials, and some that aren't even in the pro ranks yet, coming out to volunteer, to collect scorecards, to watch hand rep, to do whatever they need to do to help out and further foster the goodwill of the sport is pretty impressive. And I just wanted to publicly thank all of our officials for that. Do you have any questions on the report or any information that I submitted to you?
Commissioners, questions for JT? How would you characterize your financial situation in one short sentence or less?
We're stable. And after after December and January, that's good. That's good.
Okay, everyone's getting paid?
Yes.
Okay, good. Nothing for us to be aware of or help you with?
No.
You had a financial review with our executive officer
We did.
in detail,
We
yeah.
had a
okay.
thorough one in July, I think
Right.
it was.
You were really busy right now, right? You had like 5 shows last weekend.
Yeah, we're really busy right now, which is, we're just off to a good start for the year. It's very good. I think the financial help what came greatly is unexpected from the Smyrtle Laboratory, being able to make something cost efficient for us. I don't need to publicly get into the details of those, but it's sustainable. So it's pretty awesome.
Good, well done. Thank you, JT.
You're welcome.
Next, Andy?
Yes, sir. Our amateur boxing program, Mr. Mike McAtee has flown in from Colorado Springs for us to address the commission.
Patiently sits there and listens to us.
Thank
through
you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. First of all, it's always good to be in California. When I left Colorado Springs yesterday, it was 12 degrees and 3 inches of snow on the ground. So today's much better. I just want to briefly go over a couple of things in my report that I'm requesting from the commission. Over the last 2 years, we've been trying to do our reporting just kind of going up until a cutoff point to get information. I think it would be having some deadlines and some specific cutoff dates for our 4 LBCs. What I'm requesting is that over the next year that my reports will be quarterly. So that'll give me plenty of time to work with the LBCs, get the information in, and then present it at the next meeting. And that would be a request that I'd like to have you all address, if that would be okay. I know as we get towards the end of the year, it's a little bit trickier because there's 5 meetings, but we'll be able to work around it. But just generally speaking, I'd like to be able to do the reports on the quarter.
Does this work for you?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you. In our report, we also talked about our high-performance boxers that competed internationally. It ties in really well with today. Richard Torres, who was in Bulgaria, who is from Tulare, California, won a gold medal earlier today. And he is one of our high-performance athletes that actually lives in Colorado Springs now. But he
What's his weight class?
super heavyweight.
Wow.
Just a great ambassador to our sport. He is now the captain of our team and has just really taken on a leadership role even though he's about 20 years old. So a great asset to our team, phenomenal young man and a great boxer on top of it. So
That's great news.
we'd sent 26 boxers to compete, which is one of the largest tournaments in Europe. And it's in their 70th year. So a lot of competition for him and the rest of our boxers. Real quickly, I know that it was ABC had put out a report for you all that there were 118 pro bouts here in the state of California. If you look at our summary last year, we did USA Boxing sanctioned 158 bouts, 191 competition days in 2018. So we're really excited about the amount of boxing that went on in 2018. The Southern Cal LBC is the largest LBC that we have in the country and is consistently outperforming other LBCs, and we look to them and their board, Joe Zanders, Delilah, and Dick Jones. They're just incredible young people, not young people, they're a little bit older these days, but they really do help our youngsters here in California, and we're really proud of that LBC. Lastly, as we move forward in March of this year, we're starting some different protocols. Our first qualifier for the Olympic trials will be in Reno. At that qualifying event, we're also unveiling our new coaches education program, which we haven't updated in several years. We've been working on it for 2 years. In that coaching education program, a lot of the issues that you all have been tackling when it comes to nutrition, weight cutting, and things like that will be addressed as part of our new coaching education program as we move forward. And we are currently working with the National Police Athletic League that has a major national tournament here in California every year. And we're working with them to hopefully be able to expand that program so we can come out here with another national event. And that would be in November of this year if we can get it put together.
Excellent. That's great.
Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioners, have questions for Mike?
So full disclosure, this Ayana Verduzco is my great niece. Her grandmother was a Urquidez.
I have a question, sir, if I could.
Sure.
Mike, when I was looking at this report, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong. I don't know. But go to the costs section for 2018. Okay, and I had two questions. Why is it that so much money is being spent on the elite level? That's one, which I kind of know the answer to, but I do think is worth explaining. And then, is it really true that a significant amount of money was spent on the women and not the men? I don't. Am I reading this chart incorrectly?
Two things. When it comes to high performance funding, and I think what you're looking at in just 2018 California women's cost, we spent about $103,443 on junior, youth, and elite, and that would be boxers 15, 16, 17, 18, and then above. And then we spent $103,000 and 11, so there's about a $400 difference.
But I'm talking about and maybe I'm missing. I'm talking about the divisions, the youth and the juniors.
What page are you on, Andy?
Just three.
It's page 3. I mean, if there's a reason, I was just wondering. I mean, look, because right here, the summary on the youth of the women's 47,829, and the summary of the youth men is nothing, zero. And I didn't know if there's a purposeful target to try to get more females involved in boxing, or I just was curious about it.
The discrepancy when it comes to the youth female boxers and then the male boxers at that age group, that may be a misprint, because we did spend quite a bit of money sending our youth team actually overseas last year. We had, for youth and junior, we spent more money last year than we have historically, so I'll have to double check.
Yeah, just get back with us. It's just maybe a misprint. I know it, but if it's not a misprint, there has to be an explanation as to why.
I would say it's a misprint, and I apologize for that. And then when it comes to our annual budget, high performance dollars that come from the USOC, that is just part of what we pay for, and that usually because they're year-round boxers is why we spend more, and because of the international component.
And I thought that I kind of knew that. I just want to make sure.
Women's participation is increasing, right?
Yes, it is increasing, and it has been a focus of USA Boxing, and it is part of our strategic plan.
You've talked about that in the past.
And we won. You see, the first page,
Yeah, it's awesome.
women won, first place, yeah, we won.
These reports are a long way from where we used to be, so I happen to appreciate them very much. Martha, right? I mean, so if they're, it looks like somebody just didn't fill in the zeros here, so.
Beating them down.
Be
I
good to
think
see
it's
the detail.
probably the whole flight and stipend thing
Yeah.
just got misplaced.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'll amend that.
All this data is great. It's a far cry from what we used to get, which was nothing. So thank you again, Mike, for all this
you.
information and your presence here.
In fact, they were so good this year that the Chinese were trying to invite them to go spar next week, but they're in Bulgaria, so.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
It's good seeing you. Next.
Mr. Chairman, the youth pancreation delegation is Ms. John Frank, I'm sure Mr. Frank will tell you about some interesting things that happened yesterday at the international level with the no-head strikes.
Good afternoon, John Frank, United States Fight League. And this time I submitted my report as an annual report, just kind of a synopsis of what went on last year. And I added, best as I could, statistical information on where the kids come from, where the events are, the gender breakdown, injury breakdown, and so forth. And also some of the competition statistics, which is kind of interesting, where we're out of the 320 matches that occurred last year, 186 ended with submissions. So that's a much higher rate than regular MMA. So I don't know if it's a trend because that's their only option to end the fight. They can't win by a knockout, but it definitely enhances a lot of the skills with some of the jiu-jitsu skills that they use. So I don't know if it's indicative of the rules or just the types of kids that participate, but it is a really high rate. As Andy mentioned, an international sanctioning body, two of them joined forces, IMAF and WMMAF. I'm not sure what that stands for, but they merged to be an international sanctioning body for amateur MMA. And they did add a youth division, and we've been advocating strongly against headshots. And a lot of other member nations, we're loosely affiliated. We're not part of the national governing body under IMAF, that's UMAF, but we are the only youth league in the U.S., so we took the lead on that. And they did finally concede to taking away the headshots, which I think is a big victory. So I think as the youth version of the sport is defined from now, it'll have some of those rules where it's a lot more safety orientated. Aside from that, I just wanted to mention that the character leadership development program that we're doing, we entered the second phase. So they have some student researchers they're sending to various different schools that are chartered under us, and they're interviewing some of the parents, some of the participants, just to get a good idea of where the program's going to go and what it's going to focus on. And then we started a new program where once the kids have 10 bouts and they are recommended under the three categories, which is respect, resilience, and reliability, we're giving them these rings here with their names.
Oh, cool.
And eventually it'll encompass, they're going to have to complete the course to get the ring. But right now we're going to give them out before it's made.
Just stick it in the movie film thing too, so they can see.
That's very cool.
That's great.
So, and this year we've had 18 kids out of the 31 that have had over 10 fights qualify for the ring. So we already made them up. We'll be giving them out probably in the next two events, which is March and April out here. The only kids that qualified were from California, just because of the larger amount and the time we've been out here. And I think that's all I have, unless if you have any specific questions on the annual report.
Let me.
Come a long way, John Frank. Yes, sir. Good.
Well, I just think that this commission and you were on the subcommittee, and you did all this work, and you appointed John Frank and stuff. I mean, I believe it was yesterday, was it? It was yesterday they announced it. I mean, that's a big deal. I don't think needs to be lost on this commission. Is essentially, there might be some little bit of differences, but essentially, the International Federation adopted very similar to California rules for international or for international competition. I mean, am I wrong? It looks similar to me.
They did, and there's some things we don't like, and we're going to keep doing what we do, obviously, and then hopefully they'll gravitate a little bit towards the trial and error that we've done.
The no head
Essentially,
strikes
it's
is big, because I don't think children getting, or youth getting hit in the head is a good idea. And, you know, so, you know, and I think this commission, you know, took the lead on that, and that was several years ago, and now
Yeah, so
it was
what
yesterday.
what Andy is referring to as we work through as a group with many stakeholders, and we got legislation passed. So we were able to get it done in a year, and it went into effect as a health and safety law. Yeah, so that's another avenue that we have, if something really matters to us with regard to health and safety, there are other avenues to get things done, so.
And then
That
I
was
would
good.
add.
That was
to-
how many years ago now? Is it 4
about
years ago?
5 years.
Oh, my gosh, yeah, all right.
I would add to their credit, I've also enlisted some of the more high-profile people in the MMA community to lend the voice and support of these types of rules. And most of the high-level professional fighters and trainers are adamantly against headshots for kids. And we used Joe Stevenson, who's a very vocally supportive of these rules, Duke Rufus out in Wisconsin, and so we kind of got a little contingency of high-profile people to support this. Because there are other member nations that went so far as threatened to boycott the entire sport if there was no headshots. So it was kind of a serious debate. Some of them, I don't even think they have the sport in their country, but as a concept, they wanted the
Well, we
headshots.
had a very hard time at first, remember? We had some detractors in California, and it wasn't easy. We had some meetings where
yeah.
they got very vocal, but look, you have, quite a bit in licensing fees now, and we don't have those crazy meetings anymore, so.
Right, now we just got to work on a few other jurisdictions. It's,
Yeah,
We had almost 250 kids that are doing something positive,
right.
training and learning and discipline. It's great, I think.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments for John Frank? Thank you, sir.
Next up, sir, is our amateur kickboxing program. Amateur kickboxing and Muay Thai.
Hi, Steve Fossum with IKF Kickboxing and Muay Thai. Welcome, or good afternoon, everybody. We've had a really good 2018. Very blessed to have some really good officials. If you notice in our report, our main focus every time we do a report is mainly on the safety aspects of the sport. Our officials have been really doing good. A lot of them have gone on to CSAC officiating as well for the pro side. As JT had mentioned earlier, we have our second one actually, a combined event with Camo MMA coming up this Friday. It's over at M3 Live. I had to think of the venue. It's M3 Live in Anaheim. So it's a combined Camo event as well as IKF Kickboxing. It's been our first one here several months back. It went over really well. Officials all worked really good. Fighters worked really good together. Promoter had a great time. We plan on doing quite a few more of those as far as those go. So my report's pretty simple and pretty basic. Not a lot of details to go over. We've picked up several new promoters in 2018, which was really good. Some had never even been a promoter before on any level, and their first shows that they did were really good this year. And we have a couple of new ones coming on board already in the springtime for this year. So I'll keep mine kind of short and sweet. And
Steve, where were the Seal Beach, where were the bouts? What venue?
In the Seal Beach one?
Yeah.
I could tell you on our website, but
It's okay if you don't know. off the top of
it's
your head.
it's like a sports center. I remember
Okay.
as far as where it was, but that was the new promoter also. He did really well. He also does MMA. I'm sure the same guy works with JT off and on as well, and he's done really well. He did his first time doing a kickboxing event, and he turned out to be a really good promoter to work with. Very professional. So he already had some background there as far as promotion wise goes. So I'll let you know on the next one if that's close to you
Yeah,
guys.
good, thank you, I appreciate that.
He's got another one coming up here in a couple of months. I
Yeah.
think, so.
If you think of it, I appreciate that. Comments, questions for Steve, commissioners?
Really happy to see you guys all working together. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sir, I'd just point out, if you look down there, since the commission delegated Steve the authority for amateur, IKF the authority for amateur kickboxing, as of this date, they've ran 232 events on behalf of this commission.
It's amazing.
A lot of business.
And we've got a really good event crew out there. Dan Still and Elaine Jola, who's run our representative side. They're traveling pretty much every weekend somewhere. And Elaine will be at the show this weekend for the one I'm talking about with IFS. Dan and myself will be with a California promoter doing his first show in Las Vegas this weekend as well, Triumphant Muay Thai. That's another thing I want to bring up. We've seen quite an increase in the pro and amateur combined events now this last year compared to past years. So
does that make it more profitable for you guys to do it that way, or
Um,
not really?
how can I answer that? It's better for the promoters if when we do a pro-am event, Andy and I talk a lot about the officials, and we try to combine the officials rather than have a set of amateur officials and a set of pros. So we usually combine CSAC officials for the referees and the judges. Timekeeper's usually a CSAC timekeeper. We try to mix with the inspectors. Doctor is always a CSAC doctor. And so far we've been doing pretty good on that. I mean, I'm sure there's probably ways we can try to look into cutting more costs for the promoters as well. But it turns out pretty good with, working with Andy and with Lee and Derek at the commission office with coordinating those officials and helping out with fight cards and stuff. So that's come a long way too, and it's become more of a smooth rhythm now. We already know what to do when a pro-am event comes up. There's no questions or worries or concerns. Kind of like with JT with Camo. What we do on that one there is basically I have JT and David Dankin, who works with JT. They assign a certain group of officials, and we try to use officials that have a kickboxing as well as MMA background. So we haven't done Muay Thai on those combined shows because we haven't got a lot of combined Muay Thai and MMA officials, but we do have kickboxing and MMA officials. So JT runs the head on organizing the officials for that basically, and we'll add in some of our regular kickboxing officials that'll do just the kickboxing matches, for example. So that's coordinated really well. That one does help the promoter out as far as fees wise goes because we're not stacking them with kickboxing officials and MMA officials, for example. So.
Thank you.
How would you characterize your financial health in one
We're good.
short sentence or less?
IKF International, of course, funds a lot of the California program, but we're doing good. We pretty much maintained stability since the first year we did it, basically. We're pretty much on that same line, you might say. We kind of figured out where our fees should be to help cover things and everything, so we're good. We're good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Steve, Commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Andy, I think you're on your item D.
No. See,
Your update on C3 Logics.
yes, sir. This is a topic that I'm very excited about to talk about. Is since this commission got involved in this subject in this topic, and just to give some history for everybody here that didn't know, is this was a long process. As soon as very shortly after Dr. Williams was appointed, he brought this to the attention. I worked with the chair. The chair worked with me, and we got on a lot of conference calls and different things, and we got the budget authority, and we bought the equipment, and then we spent a lot of time training in the field as well as with the MAC, showing, okay, what exactly do you want to do? And the direction that I have is we want to do baselines for a while, okay, basically for a while until we get as much of the licensing population as we can done. As I sit here today and tell you, we haven't tested every single one, but we've tested as a percentage a vast, large quantity of the licensing population. Okay. So, what are we going to do with the data? Well, it's now time to move to phase 2. And we'll be having a MAC meeting in the future, but I spoke to Dr. Williams about this. And Something that I was working with Frank Karuba from C3 Logics last week, and I was looking at the data that we had collected. And it's like I know what your chart says, but it's like 1,200 now, and then you compare it to what's called follow-up baselines of neurological function. So you put one, then you can follow it up on another one and graphically see it. And that's where we're headed. And that's what this year is going to be about as we continue to collect baselines on new fighters, of course. But this is where we're headed. And this is something I asked Tricia to do, and this is just a graphical representation. It's just easy, but you can see the commission's medical requirements in a line there and what that would look like. So what we've added is we've added a C3 Logics baseline and a C3 Logics follow-up test. Okay, so when I go back to the MAC, I'm going to ask, okay, how often do you want a follow-up test? But just as a general rule for the staff or whatever, we're going to try for every 365 days for every year. Okay, so once a year. And then there'll be some criteria. I'm sure the MAC will tell me, okay, we'd like it if they're stopped or knocked out, or we'd like it for various reasons. But this is kind of and this kind of will correspond and go right with that examination of boxer applicants regulation. Would you like to?
Yeah, just to add on to what Andy said, first of all, it's been a tremendous effort to have tested 1,200 people. That's a huge number. I don't think that there's any other entity that's combat sports or otherwise, that has that kind of database. So we've got a lot of data to work with. And as Andy was saying, that we're kind of moving into this phase 2 and phase 3. And phase 2 would be repeat testing. There's different ways to do that. This is part of what the MAC is discussing and deciding on now. Do you just do that on a regular basis, on a yearly basis? There's probably some potential advantage to having a subset of people who are retested after an event. There may be benefit to retesting prior to their next event, or after a TKO or knockout or hard bout, or so repeat testing is part of phase 2. But one of the other things that we're really excited about is the ability to start to mine that data, look through that information, and look for correlations between some of the C3 information and weight cutting, for instance, or some of the C3 information and a fighter's record, win-loss record, how long they've been fighting for, so we can start to develop some information related to fitness to return to fight, and even recommendations about when someone should retire. And then mining that data in other ways. We can think of correlations and develop hypotheses that we want to test with research or what have you. But one of the other things that Andy and I have talked about is, with such a vast amount of data that can be combined with other buckets, we can, I hope, use computer, big data, supercomputing, that kind of thing, to develop correlations that we may not have even thought of. And do some predictive analyses and that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, this is just, I think, a huge opportunity, given the volume of the fights that we have, the volume of the fighters that we have, the kind of data that we're collecting with C3 that can now be combined with other information that we have. And it'll help us from a health and safety standpoint, absolutely. But I think it'll also help with that effort with respect to research and what have you, too. So I think we're off to a great start with this.
Dr. Williams, do we have those points that you just made kind of enumerated somewhere? Do you have them?
I do. I can forward them to him. Yeah, I have them right here. But Andy and I have talked about it, but I can, formalize it and provide it.
This is good information to share at Sunset.
Okay. And it's, I'm sorry.
Just,
Okay, go ahead.
so can you get that from Dr. Williams? Would you get those?
Well,
Please.
I just was going to say, and Tricia, what was the name of that college we sent the information to? It was Texas Christian. Yeah, Texas. We've got a lot of our weight cutting data over in a university that's it's public information, but they're mining it, to use your term. And once we get it usable, they're going to get it back to us in various thing. And it's my hope that I can send this to the people, and we can get some we can like start looking for the correlations, but we're doing that with that data. So that's over there, and that's, to use your term, one bucket. And then we've got this. And then also Commissioner Martha last year worked with a statistician, or that once we get some of this stuff together, what we're talking about is predictive analysis. Okay, BoxRec has it. It's a very incredibly difficult formula, but Commissioner Martha helped pioneer that MMA severity index. A lot of calls on that. I don't think all of these things that this commission's doing is independent from each other. They all link together, and it's all about like how do you protect the fighter this way, and how do you keep them out, and what's the predictive analysis, and what likelihood are they going to get stopped. So I think that's all helpful, and I just, it's pretty exciting stuff because we have all this information, all this data that we can use, and all these new computers and all these various things, and
Keep people safe.
to keep people safe.
These are the things I hope we're going to bring up be prepared to bring up at Sunset.
Can I
It's
ask-
better than talking about pro rata, okay? Yes, Commissioner.
So, if you remember, the C3 Logics kind of started because when Dr. Williams got appointed to the commission, I was trolling through his website and I found this great article that he posted about return to play. And it says something like, on the average, 67 days for men and 27 days for women, proving once again that we're superior. No, just kidding. But, and so I asked Dr. Williams, should we be changing this medical suspension thing to 27-67? And Dr. Williams said, why don't we,
Have some data.
why don't we send this to the MAC? And the MAC came back and said, no, that's totally arbitrary as well. And this is the way that we should be doing this is with C3 Logic. So my concern is I'm still concerned that this 30, 45 suspension time is arbitrary. It's an arbitrary, they're completely arbitrary days. It's been going on for 100 years. We're still doing 30 to 45. And in all of this data that we're mining, I don't want that. I hope that doesn't get lost because in my mind, that's still a very important thing that we need to.
Yeah, I can assure you that that's not lost and not getting lost. In fact, if you look at the few publications that have come out over the last few years about return and fitness to return to combat sports, that's the number one issue in each one of those papers is that needs to be addressed rather than having an arbitrary approval process for return to fighting. There should be some demonstration that the athlete has returned to their baseline relative to neurological function, and that's exactly what we'd be looking at.
Because, if we can give everybody their own, return to play, I don't know how hard that's gonna, it sounds impossible to me, that's you guys' job, but if we can tell, well, you've been knocked out, you get 27 days, you get 37 days, that would be amazing, because then that's, the second injury is just another injury, right?
Yeah, and I think, we've talked a little bit about this, but on a practical level, that might be one of the incentives for the fighters to participate in some of these reassessments post-bout and at regular intervals, because it's possible that they could be cleared sooner, and they don't have to wait X number of days before they can spar again, because they've been able to demonstrate that they've recovered and returned to baseline sooner than that. So but that's a point well taken.
Okay, sir. Just moving on from C3
So
to,
we're going to gather up these points that we're talking about here, these excellent points, and we're going to have those prepared.
we'll have them prepared for our next Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah. Next up, staffing update. As commissioners probably realized, since you have been here last, I hired Tricia Blackstock. Tricia Blackstock, who used to run the Arkansas Commission, used to be the chief inspector for that commission over there. She's very helpful. She sets up all of my presentations at the Association of Boxing Commissions meetings when I first met her. And she's acts as their social media liaison. Heather Jackson left. It was a good fit. She competed for the job. I didn't pick her. She competed. and then interviewed, and she scored the highest. So I'm pleased about that. I have one vacancy. Well, it's a 0.5 vacancy. When we go back to talk about the appropriation or the spending authority, at this particular time, as of February 19th, I don't have enough appropriation right now to fill that vacancy because I'm having to spend money on inspectors. Okay, because we're running so many shows. So that's but I will be running a budget change proposal for next year to get additional appropriation to fill that particular vacancy. Any questions on staffing? Okay, just Part F. Association of Boxing Commissions ratings criteria. As this commission knows, last year you authorized me to go to the ABC and request a change in the ratings criteria. It was the first change in 18 years. They added weight cutting provisions to the ratings criteria. WBC has been remarkable in their compliance with that. They've came out with much more stringent things than we required. They're taking all these. In fact, just today, as we were sitting in here, they just conveyed all of their data to the Association of Boxing Commissions. I saw it on my phone. Been very helpful. IBF was already doing it long before the International Boxing Federation was doing it. Long before they pioneered the second day weigh-in there as part of their protocols. ABC uses 10%. They use 10 pounds. Nonetheless, WBC and IBF, I knew exactly where they were at based on based on the press reports and just the communication with them. I didn't know where the World Boxing Association, the World Boxing Organization, WBO and WBA were at. So, I have dealings with these organizations quite often. I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me. They knew I kind of pushed this thing through. So I asked Mr. Walker to send them a letter. He drafted a letter, sent to the WBO, sent to the WBA. The WBO responded back. I believe that's in your packets here. They said they're in full compliance. We'll see, but that's what they say.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
I said we'll see.
Before that.
They say they're in compliance.
They are in compliance.
Yeah. We've yet to hear from the WBA. Have you heard anything? No. So that kind of moves to another piece in this ratings criteria. We'll get there, and I'm not going to exactly name names, but I sent the commissioners an article a week ago, something like that, about the way that sanctioning bodies basically classify world champions. Okay. I think it's probably time, and we have time for the next meeting. I bring the commission language, and you authorize me to go back to the ABC. I think this commission should probably, I think the ABC should specify that there is one world champion per division. I think that would be helpful for the public, helpful for the fighters. Okay. I don't know if it's helpful to have a super champion and a world champion. I'm not sure what a super champion.
Helpful to whom? Yeah, not to us or the fighters.
Certainly you could have other belts, regionals, internet, but the big belt, the belt that TV looks for, the belt that fighters want to associate as being the world champion, that should mean world champion in my view. And one of the responses I got was very, and I read it and I thought about it. How do I best address this? How can I look at this? And I think it's through the ratings criteria of the association. On the flip side of it, we've also looked at enforcement mechanisms. Having said that, just I'll leave it there, but the enforcement piece of it, I'm looking into. It's on my radar. I'm trying to be thoughtful about it. I want to work with people, try to get them to do the right thing. But we've not heard anything. We'll give it a little bit more time, but I didn't waste my time, and certainly didn't waste the commissioner's time trying to pass something that doesn't mean anything. I think weight cutting is a big problem in the sport, huge problem. I think it's tied to all kind of other problems with this sport. And if we can address it at championship level fights through the ratings criteria, which the ABC did, I think that's a good start. So I'll leave it there with the ratings criteria update. Number of shows. We've already highlighted on this a little bit before. Sir, I misspoke when I told you 59 televised events last year. It was 60. I forgot the last one we got, the UFC 232. The commission run 118 professional boxing shows. It's more than Texas and New York and New Jersey and Nevada put together. And these are small events, medium events, and large events. California gets all the different kinds. And if you looked at the numbers from our amateur programs, the healthy numbers for the kickboxing program, the amateur boxing program, the amateur mixed martial arts program, and we even have the youth league, those are healthy numbers.
That's got to be well over a few hundred, right?
Absolutely, sir.
That's what I was thinking about earlier.
So when you take those kind of numbers, you don't get these kind of professional numbers without that kind of amateur participation. This is the way it's essentially it's a farm system. And for all intents and purposes, across every metric that I think you could use, the combat sports in California is healthy. It's healthy and it appears to be growing. So, having said that, I'll leave that there. Unless you have any questions. This was a chart I sent out, and it's not, and this is just at really high level, but you can't even. It's hard to read because of the. But the bottom line is, here's what this means. This state is boxing heavy. It's money comes from boxing. Its revenue largely comes from boxing. But the UFC is the second biggest contributor. And with Bellator at 9%, so 14-9. And then you have a few other smaller MMA promotions.
Boy, you can see yourself up there. And growing.
But I thought this was an interesting chart.
Could you send that chart on the internet?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will. I thought it was interesting to see, and look, there's Top Rank at 12%, and Ringstar and TGB. Now this was from last year's, and these numbers they change some every year depending on the TV and depending on the different stuff. But if you look at that, I mean, you've got Tom Loeffler, which Roy helps, that Roy's part of. You've got Richard Schaefer and Tom Brown. You got Bob Arum, and you got Oscar's company, and basically you've got six companies that make up 70% of this commission's revenue.
I don't feel like that's too lopsided, though. I think that's a good diversity of number of companies. I mean, I don't think that's your point, right?
No, sir. I think, in the scheme of boxing promotions, if you look at this, these people are competitors with each other. I think most people could agree with that. Right. And the piece of this puzzle is, I mean, everybody's getting.
Wouldn't you say that the competition is the most heated over the event space, right, facility?
Correct.
Yeah.
They try to get the events and, but, and I want to just, because this is worth pointing out in a public meeting, is you have a situation happening right now that commissioners need to be aware of. Is we have an interesting thing that's happening in sports entertainment in general. This commission gets a lot of its revenue from sports entertainment fees. The older traditional media, I'm talking about your DirecTV, your cable, your Disney. Disney has bought rights for UFC and for Top Rank. So their ESPN now airs ESPN, UFC, and Top Rank. Golden Boy is now running a lot of stuff with DAZN, okay, and that they're having real nice events. I would encourage you, if you haven't subscribed, it's very nice. I like it. Fox has got a contract with Premier Boxing Champions. That's Tom Brown's company over here on this side. And Richard Schaefer works with them as well. Tom Loeffler, I talked to him last night for half an hour. So we'll be seeing, we'll see what happens with them soon. Bellator is also with DAZN. They're owned by Viacom, the Paramount Network, so you see them on there. But the reason I point all this out to you is just so you're aware that we're seeing a shift. I don't know if you call it a shift away from, but in addition to sports entertainment coming in with streaming. So there's some competition to be, in effect, the Netflix of sports in some respects. And so we've got our first event coming up in time, not public. Matchroom Entertainment from the UK is now licensed with us, and they're looking at doing something with us soon.
And you should mention that we still get that the TV tax just like we with streaming, just like we do with TV.
Yes.
So that's not.
Absolutely, Chairman made that very clear back at the San Diego meeting.
That's
and,
right.
And I mean that, and look, there's been absolutely no pushback. Everybody understands what the law says, and it reads just like this. Tricia, can you go up and look at the smaller promoters? I mean, I don't want to call them smaller, but they're doing a lot of volume.
Roy, are you streaming your stuff? You used to do that on an app, right?
Pardon me?
You stream Fight Club, don't you? You stream it, right?
Yes,
You have
well, we do it on Facebook Live.
Facebook Live.
But Andy is so right, the digital way is in the subscription base is where it's going right now. I mean, and you can make a case that the jury's still out, that the zone is spending, guaranteeing a whole lot of money, and they need to get those subscribers. But then the other side, look at ESPN Plus has had a phenomenal growth in their subscription, $4.99, because they have UFC and Top Rank.
So
But our shows are not big enough. I'm not big enough. Our fighters are just 1-0 fighters or club fighters, so there's really not a demand for someone to pay.
But I'll give you a plug. You opened up basically a new venue at the Hawaiian Gardens facility, which is, I went and attended your press conference. Really, really nice. I was impressed, by the way, how nice it is.
the reason I wanted to show this is Roy. Roy's on here, and Roy's present, and Roy's show and some of the other shows. They're just like what we were talking about before. They're incredibly important to the rest of the markets because they produce the fighters that fight at these other shows. It's a farm system, and we've just had our amateur program come up, and you think of that, and then they go to the smaller shows most often, and then they go somewhere else. And to your point, sir.
Curtis, what's his last name? Melander? Curtis?
Curtis.
You're a fighter that he was at the UFC.
UFC, yeah. So to your point, sir, that you brought up earlier in the market, I feel like this chart demonstrates that the market's healthy in California. Like you don't have lopsided big blocks of 30 or 40% in one promoter.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then just finally with H. This is the event schedule. This weekend on the Zone, if you have it, I'll be down in Fresno at Combate at the Save Mart Center. Pachanga, we have Pachanga on 3/29, March 29th. If you're able to make it out, that's going to be a really nice event. It's a Bellator. And then the next day at Fantasy Springs, that's a world title fight out at Fantasy, WBO. Then we have Combate again on the 26th of April, and that's down here at the Galen Center. And then the next day, if you're able to make it out at the SAP Center in San Jose, that's a tentpole major Bellator event in San Jose. It's not on the schedule yet, but it's already on the box rec, so I'll go ahead and talk about it. They've just not permitted it. We're getting unless something happens and the one opponent's out, but Lomachenko is tentatively scheduled to fight in California on April 12th at the Staples Center.
Right.
So we'll see if that. Still looking for the opponent, but you might want to just tentatively mark that into your calendar.
What date?
April the 12th.
Can you tell them to fight before April 9th?
Oh. Now this one's not on here because this came out when I had to send it out. Please mark this one down. 3/9 at the Dignity. Is it Dignity Health Park?
Dignity Health.
Yeah, it's the old StubHub Center, Dignity Health. Okay, we got a Fox show, a big Fox. 3/9. It's Sean Porter. Sean Porter. Yeah. So.
Well done.
All right, thank you, sir.
I tell Andy that Top Rank is doing an ESPN show. I don't even think they said requested because they just contacted me for the hangar on Saturday, March 23rd.
Well, see, I knew we were getting something that day because Carl had told me, but
Saving my seat. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, great. Thanks for telling me that, Roy.
Is that it, sir? Is that your report?
Yes, sir. That's it.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments on Andy's report? There's a chance for the public to comment on executive officer's report. Stand up and be recognized. Greg, where have you been? I was worried about you, man.
Well,
introduce yourself, please.
my name is Greg Kajapacho from Octagon Nation. The main reason why I'm here is one thing is I call that number right now.
What number?
I'll do it for you right now. So I say if I want to report something or I want to get a license.
While he's looking, is anybody else freezing up here?
It's a little cold. Yeah.
Let me see. 6, 2, 5. California State Athletic Commission.
Party you are trying to reach is not accepting calls at this time.
So if I ever want to get a hold of the Athletic Commission, they don't pick up.
What number are you calling?
916-263-2195. California State Athletic Commission. Do it again.
I've never heard of that. It may be.
So if someone wanted to do something or want to do an event, here's California State Athletic Commission, CSAC.
you are trying to reach is not accepting calls at this time.
Okay, someone report an accident or something like that, or something's going wrong, or a smoker, which I try to promote, calling smokers. They say, oh, they're police and they're fire department. They're police. We can't do nothing. They say they can do whatever they want, so we can't do nothing. So the budget we just talked about.
Do we have that number that we can then fix?
Yeah,
Do you have it?
1916
That's Shiloh's
263
number.
2195.
Well, I just called. They picked up. It's
I'm blocked.
yeah. I mean, I believe that's
Yeah, go figure that, huh?
well. You used the
That's a good
you
one.
used you
Come on, unblock Greg, you guys.
So if I call them up, I had some people that wanted to get a license to do regular stuff, but I can't
You have
get through
emails,
this.
you have the email addresses, right, Greg?
Oh, come on now. They
But
don't
you have
respond.
them,
They don't
right?
respond to emails.
Okay, but you have them.
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Okay, now this budget report. Why wasn't WWE listed up there?
because it clearly says it's the combat sports revenue. The WWE's not. We get money. From
Okay,
WWE.
boxing 176,000, wrestling 228,000, mixed martial arts 123,000. Wrestling, WWE brings in more money than boxing and MMA, and you guys don't even list it up there.
Okay.
Now, the only people I call the Athletic Commission on this, the only people that they regulate is WWE. Every other single wrestling organization in California, they do not tax. Lucha Libre, the Mexican wrestling, all fake wrestling in the state of California is not taxed. The only one is WWE because they were threatened that we're going to regulate you. Then they won't be able to do steroids. So, wrestling right here, fightopinion.com. You can go on there and it shows that wrestling makes more than the California, any sport, boxing, kickboxing, MMA in the state of California. So that's one issue. So why?
Okay. This was the executive officer's report.
Okay, that's one part. That's on one part of it. So
Right.
I want to go over all that. Neurological fund. Okay. Back in the day, I requested, where is the $100,000 missing that no one knew where the neurological fund went missing? I still haven't got a response.
Okay.
There's $100,000 missing from the neurological fund, and no one has given me an answer. Okay, the neurological fund, 1998, the neurological fund is supposed to be for brain scans, testing. What is this C3 logic? Now you only test pro fighters, okay? Amateur MMA fighters fight way more than pro fighters. Amateur kickboxers fight way more than professional boxers. You got Kyokushinkai Karate. This guy allowed every single year in January, Kyokushinkai Karate tournament is allowed in California where they kick the head with a spinning heel kick. It's like a baseball bat hitting your head. But you guys declared pancreation full contact with no head strikes. So let's say I brought this here. This is you're a brain surgeon or neurologist. This is a professional fighter's head. Professional hand hits his head. Say this is amateur fighter's head. Well, amateur fighter's not been tested.
Greg.
So, well, no, he hasn't been tested since 2010, and nothing is going wrong. But you're testing.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Relax.
I'm just saying.
Yep.
Okay, you're testing pro fighters. You're taking money, taxing money from a neurological fund for pro fighters, but you're not using it for neurological testing. Amateurs have been doing it since 2010. It's 2018. And these amateur fighters are fighting way more than pro fighters, and they're not even getting tested. Then you say amateur boxers have to wear headgear for the health and safety of the boxer. But a kickboxer does a spinning heel kick to the head. It's like a heel. It's like a baseball bat hitting the head. Oh, he don't have to wear a headgear. Only a boxer has to wear headgear.
Okay, let's stick to the report.
I am. I mean, it's just so crazy what is going on here that I've been seeing since I've been with you guys. You know, the commissions, you're only supposed to serve 4 years on the commission, and Frierson served 16 years on this commission. Some of you guys are past 8 years almost. You're only supposed to serve 4 years in this California State Athletic Commission. This guy's been here since 2000. I
Okay,
mean,
what else you got?
okay, so that's one issue. Let's just go on to, let's go on to Camel regulating a, here you got USA Boxing, they regulate adults and they regulate kids. Okay, you have IKF, they regulate adult kickboxing and they regulate kids. Now, pancreation, you have youth pancreation, one organization, and then you have adult pancreation, who's Camel, regulating pancreation, and you're separated. Well, Camel never reports on pancreation at this meeting. There hasn't been one pancreation tournament since 2010, which you guys had me arrested, threw me in jail with no warrant sent to my mail, and I was thrown in jail. I didn't even see a judge to keep me away from that meeting in 2010, and these guys are now regulating pancreation with pancreation. There's no adult pancreation. It's extinct, but I can go do a Kyokushinkai karate tournament. I can do flying hit kicks to the head, and it's like contact. I can do a sports MMA event with Andy Foster. It's like contact. But if I want to do pancreation, no head strikes, full contact.
Okay.
Okay, I address the C3 logic, which I think is a joke. And I address these organizations.
You got 2 minutes. You've gone way over.
And I'm just saying, it goes, what is going on? I mean, I have the business and profession codes. I read that thing. There's not one thing that technically you go by. You don't, light contact is a sport where they do not strike the head. Pancreation does not strike the head. So it should be considered light contact. I can go do a continuous sparring tournament tomorrow with head strikes. The kid's hitting the head. I can go do a point kickboxing tournament, adult and kids. No doctor, no ambulance, no regulation. But if I want to do a pancreation tournament where a person doesn't even strike the head, I have to go through Camel and I have to go through USFL. So you really need to look at this pancreation issue.
Okay.
And if you don't look at this issue, I will be here at every single meeting addressing this.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming. Okay, agenda item number, I think we just did 11. No.
Open up further.
Yeah, this is 11. Agenda item number 11, Business and Profession Code Section 18640.5 requires the commission to invite stakeholder testimony at commission meetings to identify actions that may lead to greater opportunities for licensees to participate in major professional boxing contests. Just to remind the commissioners, this is actually something that we're compelled to do that goes back. It's kind of redundant, but there it is. I don't know if Spencer, if there's a way to not have to include that, or does it matter? It doesn't take up a lot of our time, but anyway, here's that opportunity.
Yeah, it has to be there.
Okay, then there it is. And if anyone has comments about attracting more major events to California, say so now. Seeing none, public comments were just made that were not on the agenda. Any others on public comments? Not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. That concludes our open session items. We're going to go into closed session. So anyone other than